Hello, hello. I'm just gonna go live on both. Yay, I'm live. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. So, I had mentioned, I think yesterday, a couple days ago, that I had been feeling such a strong calling to share my story because I feel as though I've shared lots of little nuggets and snippets along the way, but I really wanted to put together a couple part series. I'm not sure how long or how many there's going to be, but I want to keep these kind of short and sweet. So around 20 minutes. So, hello. My name is Amanda. Catherine Amanda Elizabeth Bedard. I was born December 15th, 1989 in St. John, New Brunswick. And as I kind of reflect back and think about what my mom told me about her experience with me in the womb, it was pretty good, but she said that I was always doing pirouettes, and now, like, after I was born, she said, now I know that you were like figure skating and playing rugby in my belly. But yeah, as a kid, I was very quiet. I was very, very quiet. My mom said to me, she was like, "You and your brother both were very, you were observers. You never really said much. You were always very good, like baby, right? Like in your crib, always very quiet, went to sleep. I used to suck my thumb, big time suck my thumb. And yeah, I believe that when I came into this world, I was an eyes wide open kind of person. And yeah, so as a kid, I was very, very quiet, very, very shy, except when I was around people that I knew, right? So my family, and it was funny because when I went to kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher told my mother, "Wow, like your daughter's so polite. She's so kind and nice. But does she ever talk?" And my mom was like, "What do you mean? Like at home, she talks tons." So yeah, as a kid, I was very, very shy in public situations. And um, my mom always allowed me to be myself and be free. And so when I was a kid, I was born on a farm. Well, no, I was born in like a hospital, but I grew up on a farm of like 140 acres or something like that. And I had an older brother who's 5 years older than me. His name was Chris. And we'll get into his story a little bit later. But yeah, in my early years, I was always around like my mom or my grandparents. My grandparents are a huge influence of me in my life. I had just maybe a few friends. Where I live is like right along the Belle Isle Bay. So in the wintertime, there was basically no one around, but in the summertime, there's kids like along the water that I used to play with and stuff. Um, and yeah, we used to just always adventure. And I used to be so comfortable alone. All I needed was my dog. And it's funny because I was making some notes and this is totally like free flow. But when I was a kid, so my mom breeds Labrador retrievers. So when I was a kid, there was this one dog, Jessie, and she was like my babysitter. And I used to just go and explore and play in the woods and play in the pond and just spend time basically between my house, my property, and the bay and the extension of the St. John River. And yeah, I believe that I was always just making up stories in my head. I was always, you know how kids are. I had a very creative imagination. I had a very just intuitive personality. Anyway, so when I was a kid, I used to make up stories and I used to talk to myself a lot. And I would go into the woods and into the fields with my dog, Jessie, and we would just explore. And I remember like I have a few really early childhood memories. And I remember I used to just lay in the fields and stare at the sky and just always wonder like what's more, what's out there. And it's really cool because like my grandmother is someone who used to always feed my imagination. She was always around to inspire me to paint, to inspire me to play, to inspire me to play music. Oh, this is another thing. So when I was like super young, I had a thing for classical music. I had a thing for Mozart and Beethoven, and I used to have this little tape deck. You know the ones where you put a tape in and you can like press play or you can like record and it's just like battery powered. I used to carry that thing around like blaring Beethoven and Mozart, and it was that's just me, like me half dressed, hair everywhere, always like those little burdocks and dandelions and leaves in my hair, and just a freedom loving child. And my mom always told me this story, always brings me back to this story, and me and like music and how music has always been really close to my heart and to my being and to my health. There were some workers one time working in our house and they were wallpapering. I think they were wallpapering. I might have that part of the story wrong. But there's two guys doing some work in our house. And I walked up to one guy and I was like, like, do you like my music? And he's like, my mom says, and my grandmother, they're just like, yeah. You went up and you're like, do you like my music? And he's just like, like, no, don't, not really my type. And my mom and I got like kind of like, oh, he doesn't like my music. And then I went up to another guy and I was like, so do you like my music? And he's like, yes, that's really beautiful music. And then I just like strutted on along on my way. And so yeah, as a kid, I was always free, very quiet, but always very outgoing around other people, or sorry, around like my family. And my nicknames were Little Amanda, Little Amanda, and Commander Amanda, because I remember this about my grandfather too. And he would say to me, he's like, like, you're not like the other women in this family, Amanda. And I was probably like 3. And he's like, you can always make a decision. And that's the thing. And like when I was a kid, I was always very decisive. I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew exactly what I liked. I remember like buying 10-cent candies and I'd be like, oh yeah, you want to share with me? And I would just literally give like whoever I was sharing with all the ones that I didn't like. And it's really cool reflecting on this because I think about like, who we are as kids are like can't get any more authentic than who we are when we're little, right? We don't have the filters, like all of the stories haven't been laid on us yet. And yeah, it's just beautiful. Anyway, so I was very happy. I was very quiet. I was really outgoing around my like the people that I knew. I loved to paint, and my grandmother, and I've got to have some of these somewhere. But my grandmother, she said, you can tell a lot by a child when they draw and when they paint and when they create. And she said, man, like I always had paintings where they were just like they were like stick, well obviously like stick people because that's all they could really do at that point, but they were always like jumping and leaping and always had like huge heads compared to the size of their body. But yeah, I feel as though with the influence of my grandmother would always be like, oh, like inspire my imagination, and she would always be like, oh, have you been talking to the fairies in the garden? Oh, and that was another thing. My mom had, because our property was so big, my mom had this amazing rock garden. She still has it, but it's cool when you're like tiny and super young. It always seems so much bigger than it does when you're an adult. And I remember I used to make up stories and fantasies and talk to the flowers and talk to the energy and talk to the fairies and the angels, and it was super cool. And so I was like this fearless child that was totally confident and comfortable being by herself. Um, Many times, and like because I was such a like explorer, often my family would be like, "Where is she?" Right? And they would always yell like, "Amanda, where are you?" And I'd always respond with, "Right here." Even when we were out shopping, "Amanda, where are you?" "Right here." Even like in, remember Sears in the like clothing department, because I was so tiny, I'd be like in the racks of clothing and it'd be like, "Amanda, where are you?" And I'm like, "Right here." And they'd always joke at me saying that. But so yeah, little Amanda because I was tiny. I really like ate like a bird. I feel like every kid eats like a bird, but I was tiny, I was small, I was little, but I used to climb trees. I used to climb the roof of the barn. And yeah, when I ended up going to school, I think that was like the end of me. I shouldn't say the end of me, but I got super, super shy and I got super, super quiet. And I don't think I ever really resonated with the system. Um, I really, I really had a hard time with other kids because I feel as though I've always been a really energetic person. And especially if someone, like, there were a couple of bullies in my school, and I won't name names, but um, yeah, I remember in like, must have been like grade two or grade three. I remember we were like reading, and it's not that I can't read, it's that I just used to get so nervous. I used to get so freaking nervous. And I remember this girl, she was the bully, and she was just like, "You're stupid. Like, you can't read." And I was just like heartbroken. And it's crazy because you think of the things that stick when you're a kid, right? Like, that still sticks with me as a 32-year-old, and I still have a hard time being like, I am a slow reader. I have a hard time with spelling. I will admit that to this day. And I feel as though it might even be like an energetic block from the girl who said that to me. But yeah, when I went to school, like I had a few friends, and I always liked to play, and but nothing will ever compare to the first 5 years of my life where I was completely free, completely oblivious to all of the systems and all of the things. Um, and yeah, I, worked my way through elementary school in Belial, and I feel like it was just a breeze. And I never did bad in school. I don't really think I ever did that great in school. But yeah, I was always just such a sensitive, sensitive, sensitive kid. And I'm trying to think of what I want to share about that. Yeah, just always a really sensitive kid, and I always, always felt very attuned to nature and to people who were just softer in nature. I remember feeling a lot of like anxiousness in my body when people were too forward or too loud. But yeah, with that, like as a kid, I was super tiny, and my brother, and we'll get further, like I said, we'll get further into like my brother later, but my brother was 5 years older than me, and he actually ended up passing away in a motorcycle accident um, just before my 11th birthday. And there was a lot like that, and I will actually will go on. Maybe I'll make this one a longer video. Everything before I was 5 years old was amazing. But I will say that once you get into, once I got into being like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, things got harder. Things really did get harder. My dad and my mom, they split up. Um, I don't really ever remember my dad being around or living with me. And my mom, God bless my mom. My mom is an amazing woman, and she has a love for children. She has a love for children, and she is a school teacher. And many of you, I mean, I actually, well, none of them, but anyway, anyone who had her as a teacher can attest to how nurturing and caring and loving my mother is. Um, sorry. Oh no, it's still going. Um, she's so nurturing and caring and loving. And with that, there were a lot of kids that she used to take in as when I was young, and so there were a lot of kids around. And with my brother, I think my brother was his nickname was like Eeyore, and I think my brother was missing his dad and very caught up in between the dynamic of my mom and my dad. And I didn't see a lot of this when I was younger because I think he protected me a lot from it. But when I was a kid, and because I was so free and because I was so content with a lot of my time being spent alone and away from adults, I don't think I really knew how to ask for help for adults. But yeah, around, I don't even know what time because this is like when I think I started blocking out a lot. Fights between my mom and my dad, and there were a few occasions by a few different friends of my brother's where I was touched non-consensually and without my permission in places that are private to myself. And I'm keeping this very PG-13 because I know I'm going to get banned if I talk too much or too deeply about what I'm talking about. But that was the point in which I totally shut down. I was never taught to speak up for myself and to, not that that was a bad thing. I don't feel like it never really like came up because I was always so outspoken, like in my family and stuff. But when something like that happened, I really just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't really know how to react to it. I didn't know how to ask for help, and I just shut down. And I let it happen, and after it did happen, I just gapped out and I just went on and I went on pretending. And that is the story for so many people, is just going on pretending. And I will say that when my brother did pass away in 2000, it stopped. It stopped. But there was this shell that got built up around me. There was this protective layer, this boundary that got really prickly. And my mom used to say, she's like, before your teens, in between your teens and your like younger years, you were so free and loving and caring, and then I just got dark. And it was tough. It was really tough because I didn't really know how to navigate losing my brother. I didn't know how to navigate talking about what had happened to me as a kid. In 1998, my house burnt down and my parents split up. And yeah, I had a really, really hard time with that. And so my channel, my outlet, my therapy was always playing sports. And I got into figure skating and I was really, really good. And I feel like when you channel all your energy and focus into one thing and you're really good at it, and it gives you so much pride and so much joy and so much exhilaration, the whole world is so much better. And so I think I'm going to end my little spiel there because the next chapter is all about moving through and navigating all of the things that happened. And so I love you and thank you for watching. I'm going to end this live.